All right. Hey, what's up, everybody? Andrew Dawson here with Operation for Freedom. Today's going to be a little bit longer of a video. We've had this question numerous times. What can I do in the fight against human trafficking? We've literally had thousands of people ask us over the years, what can we do? What's our responsibility? What's our job? How can we get involved? What can we physically, tangibly do to get in the fight against human trafficking? We've also had people say, hey, I want to do this for a living. I want to be involved in this. I want to quit my current job and get involved in the fight against human trafficking. That's what today's live stream is about today. So it's going to be a little more casual, a little bit more training today as we walk through this. So I just want to dive right in. And you can see this here. What can you actually do? That's the question I want to ask um, our group today. And hopefully, we get to the bottom of this and you get some good information that allows you to move forward in the fight against human trafficking. That's our goal here at Operation for Freedom. This channel is to educate, make people aware, help people find their place in the fight. So that's what it's about today. So I want to share the most common areas. I've got 6 areas where these are most identified in the fight against human trafficking in the anti-human trafficking field. So these are the 6 most common areas that we see people having either full-time careers, working full-time in charity work. And these are the main spokes of the wheel I want to walk through. There's 6 of these. So here we go. Let's jump in. All right. So number 1 is awareness and education. Awareness and education. This looks like media campaigns. This looks like working in training programs, something similar to what you're watching right now. Events training, media. Also, I believe like legal work with lawyers, legal firms, creating laws and defending victims in the court of law. I believe this is where this fits in, is awareness and education. This is where this is probably the first part of the rabbit hole that we dive down into when we jump into this, is awareness and education. Not just education for those individuals in our communities who maybe we're putting an event on for, but also our personal education, which we'll talk about in the next few minutes. Number 2 is this. It's victim advocacy. I would say most victim advocates are ladies, typically because they're in such direct connection with victims and victim services. This looks like social work. Typically, victim advocates work with local service providers, sometimes with law enforcement, but typically local community organizations that provide services specifically to victims of human trafficking or sexual exploitation. And this comes in many forms. And typically the education process is social work at its basis. And then there's some really good victim advocate programs. I know some law enforcement agencies actually have year-long training programs where, as a lady, you can join and be trained in trauma-informed care and local services, and have a real plethora of resources available for victims when they come into contact with law enforcement, either through an arrest, and a trafficker gets arrested, and on scene there's a victim. Victim advocates are able to show up. This is it's typically a long-term care approach. I mean, you're digging into the lives of these victims with trauma, and you're working one-on-one. It's typically you have a caseload, and you're jumping in headfirst after training. So there's some great training programs out there. I'm going to list some of those in the description below that you can check out as well. So next is this, counseling and therapy. If you're a therapist, if you're a licensed therapist, if you went to school for counseling, and this is something that you want to get involved in a moment, I'm going to talk about how to start into full-time work in the anti-human trafficking field. And this is going to come into play. But obviously, this is a huge aspect of the recovery process of victims once they've been rescued, once intervention has happened, and they get into a long-term care facility and they go through recovery. Counseling and therapy is a huge spoke to the wheel when it comes to fighting human trafficking. Next is shelter work. This is probably, I would say, one of the toughest areas to work in the anti human trafficking field, shelter work. I've had numerous individuals, I may be speaking at an event or doing a training somewhere around the US, and inevitably someone comes up and says, "Hey, I have a heart for this issue. We have a home, we have a ranch. We want to start a shelter, and we want to connect with organizations and begin to house these girls. How do we get started?" And I've always directed people who have no experience in this field to run as far as you can away from shelter work. And if it keeps chasing you, then accept that purpose and call on your life. This is one of the toughest aspects. It's a needed aspect. We need more shelters. We need more shelters for underage victims under the age of 18. There's a lack of this, but this is one of the toughest areas to get into because of state regulations. If you're a state funded organization, there's a lot of regulations, training. You have to have staff, you have to have teachers, educators, security. It is a big undertaking. And so I've always encouraged people to start somewhere else and before you jump right into shelter work, unless you know this is all it is. This is like your calling. You can't get away from it. You've tried to get involved somewhere else. And I know that may be controversial. You may be mad. I mean, let me know if you think this is the wrong idea to have about this. Let me know if you have a different opinion. But I believe this is one of the toughest areas to work in the human trafficking field. But with an asterisk, it's needed. It's needed, and so it's a huge need in our world today is shelter work. So we need more. All right, and next here is intervention and direct outreach. This would probably be a bigger interest for most people who aren't involved in law enforcement, but intervention and direct outreach looks like on the street, direct outreach to prostituted women. This looks like working in vulnerable neighborhoods. This looks like working in hotels and in massage parlors, reaching out directly to those who are being sexually exploited in their time of sexual exploitation. So they're currently in a state of exploitation, need help, and intervention work is what that is about. And that's also another term is direct outreach. It obviously takes training. All of these areas take training and education, and there's a barrier to entry if you're going to be good at it, if you're going to be effective at it. It also looks like strip clubs. I know a lot of ladies, a lot of very amazing women who are working in the anti-human trafficking field, and all they focus on is reaching out to strip clubs in their communities where trafficking. This is an area where if you have strip clubs in your community, you 100% have prostitution in your community. And let me know what you think about that. Let me know if you agree or disagree with that. But intervention and direct outreach is typically what most people want to be involved in when we connect with them just after an event or in our trainings or when they serve with us in Las Vegas in our work. They want to get involved in that direct connection to it. Take some training, but that is another spoke to the will. And last on the list here is law enforcement. If you're law enforcement, there's obviously this is a huge point of the spear area. Maybe you're retired law enforcement and you want to get involved in an organization doing this work or start your own organization. Maybe you are retired military or you're active duty military and you have time where you can get involved in an org, as well as you're active law enforcement in some community and you want to connect with this. Obviously, this is a massive spoke of the wheel when it comes to missing kid searches and stings, reverse John stings, child pornography investigations. There's a lot of work that happens in law enforcement. And I think one of the myths or things we believe about human trafficking work is it always has to be done in this area, especially guys. I mean, there's a lot of guys who are heavy into tactical shooting, and they're into the gear. They wear the 511 stuff, which is all cool stuff. Nothing, I'm not bashing that. But typically, this is where they're going to focus, and either in an active duty law enforcement position or in a volunteer position with an organization that focuses on this. You see a lot of guys with heavy emphasis in this area. Obviously, guys are needed in all spokes of the wheel when it comes to fighting human trafficking, but this is a bigger one. Obviously, a lot of ladies too. I mean, a lot of women who are police officers and work in the law enforcement field as well in this fight. So that's typically the main 6 areas of working in the human trafficking field. Those are the 6 main spokes. There's some offshoots of this that you could probably put into one of these 6 categories. But people always ask us, how do we get involved? How do we do this? And I always list off these 6 areas. I say, hey, are you connected in any way in your community to any of these 6 main pillars of the fight against human trafficking? Great areas to get involved, probably the main areas. There may be more. You may have other areas that you would list out separately from these 6. Put those in the comments below and let me know what you think. So next here, I want to answer this question. How do we start into the fight? How do we just begin to pull the trigger? How do we move forward in this? I can obviously tell you all these areas, but then how do we take action? One of the things that we're passionate about at Operation for Freedom is the tangible. How do we take action? How do we do something about what we've learned? How do we get in the fight against human trafficking? I hope out of this channel you're inspired and you do something. You don't just watch these videos and go, man, that's interesting. Wow, that's good content, or I learned something from that. But I hope you would take what you learned here and put it into action, into your community, into your world. And so I want to talk about how to start into the fight, how to start getting into the fight against human trafficking. And so here's a couple 3 things. Number one, and first and foremost, this is something that isn't as sexy typically, but you have to get educated in the fight against human trafficking. You have to get educated first. That's huge. A lot of people want to just jump right in. They say, hey, I'm going to get in, I'm going to start doing stuff. And if we take a moment and begin to do some research, begin to read, man, we've got team members who I'm always impressed with them. They've read literally everything on the internet when it comes to human trafficking. They've gone to every training. They've read every book they can get their hands on. And that really is what it takes. You have to get educated on this issue. It's not a black and white issue. I'm not throwing any shade at homeless outreach, but this is not. I'm not saying that, but this isn't just serving soup at a soup kitchen. It's a complicated, definitely gray issue. It's complicated. I mean, it's one of those issues where you're not just going to jump in your first day and begin to doing some crazy intervention work. If you do, you'll probably get in trouble. You'll probably damage some victim. You'll probably make things worse. You'll probably maybe even get yourself into a harmful situation if you don't get training and you don't learn about this issue. So, number one, to get started, this is a great way to see if you're passionate about a topic or a cause, is just to begin to read on it. Are you reading? Are you learning? Are you growing? Are you seeing who's involved? Are you looking up organizations involved in the fight and learning their purposes and objectives and missions? And that is the number one starting point. You should dive in head first. I'm going to include some links in the description of some organizations you can begin to read about and get some of their resources. There's some great organizations that are not us who have some great resources that you can start learning from to dig into this field of human trafficking. And maybe I'll include some links on some online classes you can take as well. So next is this. Connect your career. This is my advice. This is after we've been in this work a decade now, and this is my advice to anyone who is starting into the fight. Get educated, and then what career are you in? Nearly every career has an opportunity to connect their career. This would be your influence. This would be your network. This would be the people that you are connected to, the industry you're connected to. This is where you can make the most significant impact right away. Now, obviously, there's other areas, and if you're going to go full time into this work, you can join an organization, but connecting your career at first. We've seen numerous nurses get involved in educating medical staff when a pimp drops off a girl at an ER or for an exam or something, and they need medical assistance. Having nurses trained to identify the red flags of human trafficking, huge. If you're in law enforcement, being able to get educated. If you're in law enforcement, you obviously have a wide open door to begin to get involved in the fight against human trafficking. That's either through education, educating law enforcement, fire department, EMS, or actually getting involved in a task force that is involved in your community and in the fight against human trafficking. So, as well as education, educators, this would be teachers, college educators, and politics. We've seen numerous politicians, local politicians, not just the big politicians. Oh, sorry, my dogs are barking over there. If you hear a dog barking, they're just saying hello. Oh, there she was again. But we've seen numerous politicians get involved on a local level, not just governors and Congress, but local politicians, commissioners in cities around America who get passionate about doing something big in their community, and they're able to make a big difference. So, and then third is this: find an organization. So how do you get started? You get educated, you get smart, you learn about the issue, so you're starting on the right foot. Then if you can connect your career, one of the quickest ways to get involved is to connect the career you're already into. And then thirdly, find an organization to get involved with. And this, I have some thoughts on organizations in the fight against human trafficking. I got some thoughts on this, so I want to share those with you. Number one is this: organizations typically have a niche that they or a niche that they work in, and they do really well. I just off the top of my head, I think about like International Justice Mission, who works in legal areas. I think about like Exodus Cry, who um, who focus on things like they're really focused on pornography right now and fighting organizations and websites like Pornhub. And so every organization, typically, if they do good work, they find a niche or a niche that they focus on. This is what we do. And I think it's important to look into an organization if you're wanting to get involved, to see, number one, do they have an on-road process for volunteers? Do they have something available for just your average Joe person to just walk off the street and get involved in? That's more than just raising funds for them. That's more than just wearing a t-shirt or a wristband and saying, "Hey, I fight trafficking. I'm wearing a t-shirt and a wristband." An organization that has an onboarding process for volunteers. So, and then two, finding their niche, and does that fit your view or your purpose or your career or what you want to get involved in. So before just saying, "Hey, I'm going to volunteer with the first organization that I hear about or the one I hear about the most on social media or on the news," first I'm going to find out what they do. I'm going to look into this, because here's the truth. Um, there are some great organizations out there that are very small, that are very unknown, that are doing an incredible job in the fight against human trafficking, and they just don't have a budget to market like a lot of other organizations do. So find the organization, find the niche that they're working in, and see if that connects to what your heart what your heart is, what you want to get involved in. Number two, orgs are organizations in the fight against human trafficking typically are hard to volunteer with. It takes time. Honestly, it takes showing up on your own dime. It takes phone calls and emails. You may not get a response. it's just harder to volunteer with a trafficking org because of the training, because of the education. And that goes back to get educated, like get educated, know a little something, step into that first interview or that first outreach or that first connection with an org and begin to share about your experience and show some passion, show some education, show that this is something that's on your heart. All great steps to get you more plugged in. It's hard to volunteer with most organizations because they've got their own crew. They've got their own educated crew who is passionate about the work. And typically, that's a tight knit group of people. This is my experience over the last 10 years. Most orgs get their people and they move forward and go after the mission that they have. And so, not every organization has a great onboarding process for volunteers. They're just about the work. So, and number three is organizations collaborate. And this is a big deal. This is really a big deal. Organizations collaborate and partner because we can't do all of the work all the time, all ourselves. No one single, less than 1% of victims of human trafficking are ever rescued. Millions worldwide, hundreds of thousands, millions in the United States alone. So we can't all do the work. Operation for Freedom can't do everything. So we have a niche, we have a niche that we focus on. And then an organization has to collaborate. They may be a point of the spear organization working with law enforcement, doing rescues and intervention work, pulling girls off the streets, finding missing kids, but they don't have a shelter to run. And so they have to partner with shelters. They have to partner with advocates. They may not have a lot of advocates, so they have to have an advocacy organization come in and work with them. We all have to partner. But the key here is when you volunteer with an organization, when you find an org that you can volunteer with, that you want to volunteer with, is to figure out what they do before collaboration and before partnership. This is so important. I've seen so many nightmares happen with individuals, volunteers, people getting plugged in with organizations just because they heard a speaker speak. People hear our team members or me speak at an organization, they want to get involved. You dig in and it's like, hey, we're not a good fit. You want to do shelter work. You want to be, involved heavily into law enforcement stings. And, they want to get involved with us. And we try to do the best job that we can of plugging people in to an organization that fits where they're called to be. And it really is a calling. It really is a calling. And so identify what they do before collaboration. Literally ask this question before you collaborate, before you partner with other orgs. What do you do? Like, what physically, tangibly thing do you do without a partner organization, without other orgs coming together? And when you find that, that's going to let you know, do I want to volunteer with this organization? I can't emphasize this enough. It's huge. One of the greatest examples, moving on, that's how we get started. One of the greatest examples of someone who has taken this advice or wisdom from working with us, a lady, she came and served with us years ago on a short-term serve trip, charity trip in Las Vegas, 5-day trip, got trained, worked with our teams on the streets, just a walk-on process, anybody, everybody. She just came in passionate about the cause, came and served with us, and then went back to her community and began to dig in, had the confidence and had the fire beneath her to go get plugged in. She started her own organization in Michigan, and it's called the Forward Human Trafficking Task Force. Her name is Sherry. And she went back and she began to resource her community. She gathered people together, rallied the troops, connected with law enforcement, connected with the sheriff's department, connected with local advocacy groups and churches, and began to stir the pot in her community. She's brought in recently our school assembly program, Say Something School Assembly, to speak in schools where literally dozens of kids were pulled out of sexually exploitive situations. She's raised funds. She just told me on the phone the other day, she raised funds for her local law enforcement after bringing in trainers from other organizations to train law enforcement on trafficking and reaching and out to victims of human trafficking. She raised funds and purchased all of the equipment they needed to do missing kid operations and stings that their department wasn't funded for. So she said, "Hey, what do you need to do your job effectively?" And she raised thousands of dollars to help her local law enforcement. And this is just part of their mission, is to resource and to train their community. Incredible person who just found their place in the fight by getting educated, by looking at the hand of cards she was dealt, and then said, "Hey, I'm going to do something about this. I'm going to find an organization to partner with, get trained, and then go to work." So here's some more wisdom. Here's some more advice. It's going to take time and consistency to dive down this rabbit hole. It doesn't happen overnight. Don't get discouraged. It isn't a, fill out this application, send an email, boom, you're in the fight. You're doing all this awesome intervention work or shelter work, or you're not going to be kicking in doors and rescuing victims of human trafficking overnight. It's going to take time and consistency. You're going to have to be a self-starter. No one's going to make it happen for you. Even organizations that have great on-road processes. We have a great on-road process where you can come serve with us on a 5-day trip and learn and grow. But after that trip, you're going to have to self-engage and start doing what you do. Like this lady, Sherry, a good friend of ours. You're going to need to email. You're going to push. You're going to call. You're going to text. You're going to show up on your own time and your own dime. When you get an opportunity to serve with an organization, and hopefully you've dug in and got some education going. So I'm not selling you anything today, but we've created a great opportunity, a short-term 5-day missions trip. If you're a church organization or a charity serve trip in Las Vegas, we host dozens of teams every year. In fact, at Super Bowl coming up, whenever at the filming of this video, we're a few months out from Super Bowl in Las Vegas. It's actually going to be hosted, the game's hosted in Las Vegas this year. We'll have nearly 100 volunteers coming in, getting educated by some of the top practitioners in the field, and then going out on the street, learning to do outreach. And then I love the ripple effects of this, because people like Sherry go back and start organizations. We are not the organization that says, "Hey, we're the only ones that do it. Work with us all the time." We love it. We have people come back almost every trip, the same people, and just love serving with us. That's their heart. They just say, "Hey, we're going to just come serve with you." But I love it when people go from these trips and create their own organizations, learn, grow, when they get involved in other organizations, when they engage in the fight against human trafficking, because that's what it's about. And that's our heart and mission. So if you found this content valuable, would you do us a huge favor? Would you like, subscribe, hit the bell? If you're still here at the end of this video, would you like, subscribe, hit the bell, and share these videos? Our whole goal with this channel is to educate, inspire, and get people in the fight against human trafficking. Thank you so much. I hope to see you on the next video. You guys have a good day.